This is IBM Museum. Once again, I have the IBM PS2 Mul 30 operating behind me. Now, I've powered up that unit to take a look over an adapter that I wanted to try and put into the PS2 model L40SX. That's a laptop PS2. And it's viewed as having the ISA bus because this is the communications cartridge. This was a device attached through a rather thick cable and was able to host a small 8-bit adapter in there. Even though the L40SX has a 386SX CPU, it only supports that one 8-bit slot for what was from IBM, and this unit plugs into power. And there's a few known things like emulation board or something else to connect into a mainframe computer, as using the L40SX as a terminal. IBM did list a few adapters that were authorized for this box. I wanted to go through and plug mine in and see just it, and I'll be going through this a little bit more in later videos. I have other ideas of what I can test in there as well. But the adapter I was trying is this Trantor T130B SCSI Adapter, and of course I have that in the Mul 30. And I was only trying it in the communications cartridge because it's a short card and fits. It's 8 bits, things like that. Just to see if I could run like the CD-ROM for them from the external connection. Really having that internal connection inside the communications cartridge box wasn't going to be of much use to me. I just seeing if I could get it to work. And I tried some jumper settings and everything, and it just didn't seem to like it. I mean, I turned off the EEPROM. I wasn't booting from a SCSI hard drive or anything like that. I was just trying to see if it recognized the adapter being there, and it was nope. But I want to kind of bring up the point, and I do have a picture of the adapter as well, and it kind of dovetails a little bit into some of the other videos. This does have an NCR SCSI controller chip on it, actually. And I've taken high resolution photos. I'll list those in the video description. And it didn't recognize it on that L40SX at all. But this is the ideal adapter for the Mul 30, like I have, and the Mul 25, being that they are 8-bit. It's an 8-bit adapter, fits in there fine, runs perfectly. In my case, it runs that internal 1 gigabyte SCSI drive, and then the external CD-ROM drive, and that I was trying to test with that L40SX. But what I wanted to do is kind of go over, when I've booted up the PS2 Mul 30, we've seen what we have up on the screen here for it going through and loading those drivers, recognizing the CD-ROM and the hard drive attached to it. There is I've gone through and I've got those needed files in a TSCSI directory. And I've actually put all these files online as well. I'll link to, I've got them zipped up in a package, basically. And of course, if you have the adapter, the T130B, but you don't have those files, it's going to be nearly useless to you. I mean, there's nice settings that are silk screened on it to kind of figure it out of how it can be configured and everything else. But for the fact of running the CD-ROM and things like that, there's, you've got to have these files. Now, I do have the MSCDEX, and I don't know if that came in the package of files I have or not, or if I put it in the directory to kind of consolidate things. And of course, that's the CD driver from Microsoft. And by the version stamp, that 600A, that looks like the MS-DOS 6 version that's in there. And just about everything else, though, is from Trantor. And I think Trantor got bought up by Adaptec. And these files may still be packaged on Adaptec site. Adaptec seems like it tries to keep up with the obsolete, quote, obsolete adapters that are out there. But I'll have them up just to go through as well. And I've gone through, of course, some of these are drivers and things like that. I went through, probably what I can do to lead in is let's go through and do the just to go through the README file, and I can just I'll press keys to scroll through screens here, and certainly you can pause it if you want to read this a little bit more for the files. And I think they go through and they kind of step through the from the latest version on back. So you see the newest version information on top. And I don't think there was necessarily a installation process for installing these files. I didn't even know where I sourced them. I do have a few of the Trantor T130B adapters. And we've actually, there is information that's also cached on the microchannel SCSI adapter. It'd probably be the same equivalent level. I think it's a kind of a doubling for all that. I don't know if it's like a doubling in performance, but that's normally called the T260. And we've actually been looking for some information for that. And I don't know if I have one of those microchannel adapters. And then this is the T130B, and I think there's an A version, but this is I think a later release of that same adapter that got some a little bit more less bugs, better performance or whatever else. They worked it over for that B version. And so I'm talking away, and I should be pressing keys. There's the first page. It talks about the SCSI works. And I mean, what got me started is that install note. And even with them saying the Adaptec mentioning that. And we have, I think, some of those files. It mentions particular ones. It even talks about some of the Adaptec stuff again and the ASPI driver. Okay. Okay. Now I'll try and work through with the screen flickers as well. See there, they're talking about an earlier SCSI Works program. And they've gone through and add the support. I should even take note of some of those CD-ROMs. I kind of built my own, and that's the end of it. Where I went through, and I haven't really shown the external exclosure that I have for my CD-ROM drive, but that's a later one. It's not a caddy drive. It's actually a later SCSI CD-ROM that would be found on later system. I don't even probably think on PS2s. It was probably from getting up in the Value Point or the Aptiva line. Fairly nice model. And the kind of the reason I mention that as well is there is some things like this check CD. And I went through on it, I think for that first file it's listed, of course, the check CD.exe. I think I ran it without any command line parameters, and it told me the C drive is not a CD-ROM. And so I went through and I tried giving it a slash question mark or question mark. And as us DOS guys know, that was typically the way to query a executable program for what parameters you could give it. And it just told me unknown unknown parameter and wouldn't go through. And so I think I did a check CD and the space D colon, which is the CD-ROM drive letter, and it seized up the machine. So that's why I do, the preliminary work ahead of videos and everything else, just to make sure what am I going to encounter a little bit. I do like being surprised the same as you guys when encountering things, but I like also being prepared and going through and figuring it out. So the next things down are the drivers at MA13B .sys. As I say, the mscdex.exe is a driver that you have to have put in your configuration files. We've gone through the README. Now for the drivers, and there's one at the very bottom, that tslcdr.sys. For those drivers, what I'm going to do ultimately after this is I'm going to show that autoexec.bat and my config sys on the system as well, just to show how those are put in and what the parameters are that I have on my system. Because you could go through, and if you have a T130B adapter, plug it in the system, grab the files, and even know how to a working configuration I've gone through and done. And I think I struggled a little bit with that when I first had it. I had to kind of figure it out. And of course, I've forgotten a lot of the information I once knew decades ago when I worked with the stuff directly. But at least I have that preserved in this configuration, and I'll preserve it on a video for prosperity too, as well, that anybody can get access to those files and how to configure it and not have such a learning curve. Now, I'll run through the SCSI test. That was kind of an interesting thing. Okay. And then so we have, it does this initial screen come up, tells the, revision and everything else. We're talking back in the early 90s in this case for this stuff. And we have the selected from that main menu of test hardware. Okay. So it goes through pass one, and we have one SCSI host adapter on here. And so we're going to answer Y for yes. SCSI device test pass one. This test searches for SCSI devices. Only devices connected to host adapters will have passed earlier tests will be tested, or which have passed earlier tests. So they're talking about just the boot up process and the drivers loaded and things like that as well. If the SCSI devices are not already connected, please plug them in at this time. I don't have to do that. They're all plugged in. Press any key to proceed with the test. Okay, pulling host adapter 1. SCSI device 1, vendor, and so this is the kind of the funny thing. It's if I've ever shown inside my Model 30, it is the SCSI hard drive, the 1 gigabyte hard drive that I have in there. It's from IBM. It's branded as IBM on the external, but apparently that firmware at some point, and I think it was basically sold and was probably on a compact server or something else, that firmware is updated and says compact for that. I guess probably IBM allowed it to be branded, but I took it back, and it's on an IBM system now, and I can't even get the brand to respond. And of course, this doesn't mean anything at all for how that vendor is. But if you look at that model number, that's an IBM hard drive. Just happens to have the compact firmware on the drive or something, and it gives all the version, direct access device. I mean, some of that information is important. I may need to look that up and even find. I doubt if I want to monkey with anything, since the drive works. I've not had any issues with it, but that's the hard drive on my Mul 30. Okay, pulling, and for the SCSI device 3. And typically I have a convention on my system. I'll go through, and of course a lot of time the pure IBM SCSI adapters are that host adapter saying is 7 if they're what's called the narrow SCSI, that can have 7 device types in addition to your host adapter. And that's usually at SCSI ID 7. And I'll typically set the hard drives to that, the 0 or 1, something in that convention. And I usually set my CD-ROM, SCSI CD-ROMs up to like 3 a lot of the time. You want to have them a higher numbered, and sometimes that affects your boot process and things like that. But I don't know how familiar my viewers are with SCSI, but there's a whole kind of world of settings and things like that on that, including the SCSI ID, setting up that SCSI ID, setting up termination. Maybe I can do a primer video on it later on. Maybe even getting into that IBM SCSI again sort of thing, and in particular with that SCSI level utility that I'm talking about for determining the microcode versions on those IBM SCSI adapters, not on little Trantors like this. So it is correct in there. The vendor is IBM. It's an IBM SCSI CD-ROM, the product. And I don't know, maybe even IBM rebranded that too, the version. And it's a read-only optical device. I don't think I could have a burner CD on as low level of CPU as I've got there. It's nice to read files off a CD, a data CD. Sometimes they even had little DOS CD player programs too. I look around for one of those. I could use the audio connections off the back of that external drive, plug them into a stereo and listen to music, start up that program and have it play the CD, and being able to advance tracks and stuff like that. And I've had players that have been able to do that before, external as well. Press any key to continue. It's going to go through, searches all the other through all the other SCSI addresses, and so it says host adapter and peripheral test results. SCSI adapters located are 1. SCSI devices found 2. If these results are not what you expect, please check hardware installation and rerun the test. Please press any key to continue. And I fully expect these results. Okay. And the test setup, and I think that's just going through and you're setting it up for, it looks like up to 4 adapters. I mean, these things for the I/O addresses and things like that, typically if they have a ROM on them, you don't have to enable it on one adapter. And that can go through and control any other adapters of the same type on the board. And it does look like it has 4 different adapter addresses that can be set. And I went through on the L4DSX and tried to figure, change those around and see if and it did make a difference. So, and of course you also have to have, if you're going to boot off a SCSI hard drive, you got to have that ROM chip in there. And it's got to be enabled and things like that too. So this test, you may even be able to have up to 4 of those adapters in a system. And I don't know the reasons why. You could, 7 devices are supported off that each host controller, unless you're trying to make an 8-bit RAID setup or something. And you wouldn't be integrated anyway. You'd just be a bunch of drives. It wouldn't be any RAID functionality. I don't think software would run for setting up any kind of RAID in software either, based on the CPU and the processing that thing would have. Those RAID controllers, they typically have higher level processors than even this MUL 30 has in it. So that's that. And then return to DOS. We still have our directory listing up there. The teject.exe, that was probably just a program that goes through and ejects the drawer, whether you have a CD in it or not. And there's the tlock and tunlock executable programs as well. And that probably what was known as locking, making it so the eject actually did work, that hard eject on the front panel. And that was designed to go through, once you had a CD loaded, you could have something that made sure that process was not disturbed, that nobody was ejecting the disk at a critical time. And when I run all 3 of those teject and tlock and tunlock, it just tells me that the drive is not supported. So those particular drives are in that README file, likely one of those, and basically that's SCSI commands that are passed to the drive to say, "Hey, lock, don't allow the eject button to be pushed and to eject that drive." So yeah, they don't function on my drive for that SCSI command set, which is surprising to me. Maybe the CD-ROM drive I have there is probably a SCSI 2 command set, and this one might be, earlier, that just doesn't support those SCSI 2 commands, or doesn't in a more proprietary way that some of those older drives would maybe expect a little bit more. So that is the, in a nutshell, that's the Trantor T130B. Excellent board for the MUL 30. And the one reason I say excellent board for MUL 30 and 25 as well, in addition to that 8-bit bus, and I've done this on the adapter I have in my MUL 30 behind me, but you can put that Molex power tap on these, as you can see in the picture below, and I'll have the link for the high-res photos as well. But you can go through, and it's not much soldering at all to find one of those Molex adapters, and maybe even a defunct 5 1/4 diskette drive. They have you can desolder it off of there and probably solder it in place on there, and for providing the drive power, because you don't have any drive power connections on the inside of normally on a Model 30 or Model 25, except on the Model 25 SX has that power tap on there for drives, but that's going up where it it was expecting an IDE drive and things like that to be off of that. So that is the way to go through and power that internal SCSI drive and things like that. So let me go through. I was almost thinking of going through and of ending the video, but I promised that I would show. Oh, okay. And I'm going to have to go through. Well, let's just go through and go to the root directory, because if I pull up the edit, I'm in that subdirectory, and I go through and say, hey, let's edit this auto exec bad, it's going to bring up a blank file for me, because it's going to think I want to work with the current directory that's in, and that file is not in that subdirectory. So, okay. So in these, and I looked through this earlier, and that I think that bottom statement, that drive param, that's for the diskette drive. Like I say, I'm running that 1.44 megabyte, and I don't even believe that drive parameter is necessarily needed in this instance. Normally, you just plug those drives in and they work, but I've got it in here just to make sure. And I don't know if, as I say, if there's an installer. There is some lines in here, like that first one, the last drive is the G drive, and that has that first letter capitalized and all the rest not for the command or for the listing in there. And I think that may have been some installer program, because normally for the ones below that, or whether they're done automatically or I do them, would have gone through and capitalized everything. I wouldn't gone mixed case like that. So who knows on that. And then the device for the CDOS setver, that's not related to this discussion. Files equals 30 is not necessarily related to this discussion as well. And then the device equals C colon backslash tscsi, that MA13B.sys, and the device equals C colon backslash tscsi tslcdr.sys, and then gives the device name, that /d colon, and you have to match those device names that the convention are using between your autoexec and your config sys. I'll show you the autoexec here in a moment, but those two lines are for the use of that adapter running the CD-ROM and running the I think that MA13B.sys may be like I'll have to look through that README file again, the ASCII command set maybe, or something else. And I may even have to look and see if there's newer versions of those files. Maybe there's something else that goes through. Now the version that I have, and I'm just going to do an Alt F, and we're going to go open, and I am going to go autoexec.bat. Okay. And as I was saying before I started typing, the ROM BIOS version I have on my adapter is 2.14. And that seems to be a pretty common version out there on the T130Bs that I've seen. I'm just staying that, and you'll be able to see that in the high resolution photos as well. So here at the top, echo off being the first command, turns off any console output basically from the autoexec.bat from there. That C colon backslash tscsi mscdx, that's the CD-ROM driver from Microsoft, and it is past the device parameter that you want, that you're naming things. I don't know what that, somebody that's more familiar with MSCDX can tell that /m equals 10. That I don't know what that is as far as maybe a buffer or something else or some other parameter that's passed to that. And really none of the commands below it, the prompt command, the path. I mean, I include that t.scsi directory, although, and of course, in my autoexec bat and config sys, I'm referring to the I don't know what they validated path or a direct reference to that path. I'm not relying. You can't rely on your path command before you run it to where the system knows that you're referring actually to a file in some subdirectory and just have the executable name in there. You've got to give it the fully qualified path name, I guess is what I was thinking of. I haven't heard that term in years, but those are just, I meant Alt F exit or X, and then I typed in Alt F Alt F Z, and it beeped at me as I don't know what you mean there. So that is my configuration files. You know, I'll link to where those are online, where pictures are, all that in the video description. So you guys are good to go if you got one of these adapters. And who knows, these things might go like hotcakes now for all the PS2 Mul 25 and Mul 30 people looking for them. And of course, you know, you can do the XTIDE boards and everything else. You can put solid state drives in your systems as well for the PS2s. You don't have to worry about power taps and everything else. But this is actually for the hardware drive, and the thought is that you may not need it, you know, for this if you have a solid state drive. But the fact of an adapter that's able to run the external CD-ROM as well. The Mul 25 and Mul 30 don't have bays big enough to mount an internal CD-ROM drive, so you've got to have it external, and typically those external CD-ROMs are the SCSI interface a lot of the time. That was just the thing. So excellent adapters once again for the Muls 25 and 30. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, click on that like button. Of course, please subscribe to my channel. Please pass the word. Try and get more subscribers to my channel. That would be excellent as well. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.